Esper Charm has 3 modes: destroy target enchantment, draw 2 cards, target player discards 2 cards. This is my interpretation of Esper control in Modern. I've tried to fit in what I believe to be the most powerful black spells in the format while maintaining the consistent blue-white shell. My favorite cards in the deck are both Kaya and Kaya's Guile, as I believe both offer effects that are hard to find. In today's video, we're going to be playing a League of Esper Control. A League is 5 rounds of competitive Magic, where a record of 4-1 or 5-0 gets decent prizes. To start off the first round, we both hit our land drops and I see a treetop village. Being confused, I just continue to hit my land drops and hold up counterspell. Our opponent plays a basic forest and a Strangleroot Geist. I obviously have to counterspell this as I'm afraid that they're on Yawgmoth. We get a basic island and plus our Teferi Time Raveler, as I'm scared of Grist the Hungertide, as they should be on Yawgmoth. Our opponent plays another Strangleroot Geist and an Ignoble Hierarch, and they attack the Teferi for 3. This is getting interesting. We draw a basic plane, so we plus our Teferi, play our land and say go, as we have Kaya's Guile and Snapcaster Mage as options. They cast Questing Beast, so I'm forced to use my Snapcaster Mage, flashing back the counterspell, and we can protect the Teferi in the combat step. We draw a Watery Grave, so I decide to lead with Consider. We bin a land and find a Kaya. I decide to go with wiping the board, as they are clearly on an aggressive deck, and I just need more time to entwine this Kaya's Guile and draw more value spells. Our opponent replays the Geist, animates Treetop Village, and gets in. Ooh, is that the card that I clickbaited you with? I think it is. Now we can't cast it, we gotta entwine the Kaya's Guile. The opponent sacks the Geist, it gets exiled because of the Guile so it does not come back, and they ram through our Spirit token with the Treetop Village. Am I seriously seeing ram through in Modern? Anyways, we untap, look how many cards they have in hand. Our opponent animates Treetop Village and casts a Rancor. Now this is interesting, as when the creature land loses its creature ability, the Rancor goes to the graveyard and bounces back to the hand. But as the luck sack we are, we fetch a Triumph and top deck a Wandering Emperor. As I didn't want the Rancor to bounce back to the hand, in response to it being cast, I'm gonna use my Snapcaster Mage and make them sacrifice the land. Then we can Wandering Emperor a creature on later turns. We use to Consider, find a Colonnade, that's a threat, let's keep it, and let's also hold up Wandering Emperor. Our opponent continues to play Pioneer Staples, casting an Old Growth Troll. This we can Wandering Emperor, so let's untap. Top decking a land is nice because we can now attack with Celestial Colonnade, as well as hold up Wandering Emperor because it has Vigilance. Again, Wandering Emperor showing to be a really powerful card in Modern. Get that troll out of here, you don't get a trigger. However, the troll's brother is coming back for vengeance and we need to top deck. Teferi Time Raveler, perfect card off the top, let's bounce the troll, bash in, and get a counter from Wandering Emperor. Prismatic Enemy off the top just locks the game up, so let's get in for some damage. Our opponent casts another troll, does nothing, so let's animate the Colonnade and ending the troll. That's game, on to the next one. As they're mono green, we want all the Aether Gusts and the removal spells, and I believe that Counterspell and Archmage's Charm are clunky, as well as Deluge is a lot of mana. Looking at our opening hand for game 2, it's insane, 2 Aether Gusts, loads of removal spells. I mean, how are they ever going to beat this? Especially with no 1-drop and just passing. Solitude off the top is the perfect draw, as now we have even more removal spells and can exile the Supreme Verdict if we don't hit our land drops. As we top deck a removal spell, let's cast it. Our opponent plays an Ignoble Hierarch and we draw a land. I'm not too fussed about killing the Hierarch, I just want to hit land drops, so here I'm actually going to use Esper Charm to draw 2 cards. I know some of you greedy nerds would have made them discard 2 cards here, but we really need to hit our land drops. With 4 mana, I don't want a Supreme Verdict as it does return the troll back to the battlefield because of its alternate ability, so instead here I just want to use both of my Aether Gusts to try and mana screw them. Sadly, they bought them both. With a Consider, we look for a land, find a Snapcaster Mage we can use on their end step to Consider again, so let's play Patient with Kaya's Guile and Esper Charm, as well as double Solitude. How are they ever getting back in this game? I'm gonna just fast forward through this, as this is one of those spots the opponent doesn't concede when you have it all. Yes, it's hidden information, but not really much happens. They cast a few creatures, we cast a few removal spells, and kill them with Combat and Wandering Emperor. During the rest of the game, I had my hands over my eyes, just clicking a random spell in my hand because it really didn't matter. We win, on to the next round. With double Esper Charm on the draw, as well as a Solitude, it's hard to mulligan this hand. Urza Saga, Amulet, on the play, we know what we're playing against, we need to get lucky. They do have the bounce land and the Dryad. I'm planning to use Solitude, however I'm going to wait some time to see if I can use Esper Charm to destroy target enchantment. With the Snapcaster Mage off the top, and we know they have a bounce land in hand, I don't particularly want them to have a lot of mana next turn, so I just decide to Solitude now, and keep the other one up for a potential Titan. Ah yes, the turn 3 uncounterable Titan. Anyways, I'm gonna let them use the fetch trigger first because they could get the haste lands and then we can Solitude, but they make a tight play and get 2 green lands as that lets them pay for Summoner's Pact on the next upkeep. With Snapcaster Mage off the top, I'm gonna Esper Charm draw 2 to hopefully draw another white spell to keep the cards flowing, as if we just Solitude pitch Esper Charm here, we lose all of our traction with Double Snap and Bloodchief's Thirst. However, when we do draw 2, we whiff, so we wouldn't have won this game anyways, GG. Against Titan, you want all the clunky removal to come out and all the good interaction to come in. Not that complicated. I keep a risky hand game too, as if we just draw spells we're going to be in a good spot, and with a Spreading Seas off the top I get confirmation bias, confirming that I essentially should be playing out Worlds this year, as I'm a master at predicting the top card of the deck. The opponent has an insane turn with Amulet and a bounce land and casting a load of cheap spells. With a Consider off the top, I decide to be mana efficient and Teferi bounce the Expedition map. There are some better arguments to bounce the Amulet of Vigor, as it forces them to recast it if they are going to have an explosive turn next turn. Our opponent uses Expedition map to get Cavern of Souls, and as I'm filling out my Worlds application, I draw a Dress Down. Our opponent does some Titan shenanigans, and they cast a Hydrate Crisis? Well, in response I decide to fetch a tapped Hollow Fountain, Consider to give us some more information, and I use Dress Down to kill the Hydra Krasis as it enters the battlefield with no counters. Drawing a Teferi Hero of Dominaria, and knowing that they have a Cavern of Souls in hand, I decide to go with Kaya to exile the Amulet of Vigor to make it a lot harder for a hasty Titan to come down. I also shock in my Watery Grave so that we can have a Snapcaster Mage to chump block if they do get a hasty threat. They have the Titan and they get Teleria West, and we draw an Esper Charm. I decide to bounce the Titan with Teferi Time Raveler, and plus with Teferi Hero of Dominaria. We can then use Kaya to exile 2 cards from their graveyard. Another uncounterable Titan. This time they get Slayer Stronghold, which they can actually pump Grazer with to attack my Planeswalkers, so I need to be thoughtful of that. We top deck a Solitude, so I'm going to tuck the Titan and hold up mana. I make a mistake by not exiling the Arboreal Grazer, as I said I'd be thoughtful of that, but that was actually in hindsight. Our opponent plays another Hydra Krasis and pumps the Arboreal Grazer. As they have a Cavern of Souls, I decide to steal the Arboreal Grazer so that I can block the Krasis with it, as well as my Planeswalkers don't take damage. However, they use a Pact of Negation? Well, here I'm going to use my Snapcaster Mage to chump block, as I believe that we don't have a lot of mana to use them efficiently over the next few turns. As Hydra Krasis has a converted mana cost of 2, let's Prismatic Ending it, plus a Teferi, untap our lands, exile the Arboreal Grazer. There's an empty board, they have to pay 5 for Pact of Negation. This is looking good for us. Another uncounterable Titan. They've cast so many uncounterable Titans this match that I've actually gone back and reused my voice note of an uncounterable Titan to save myself time on this earth. They get another Teleria West, but we're in a great position here. As we exile the Titan, let's plus all our Planeswalkers as well as attack with Solitude so that we can put pressure on them and threaten Kaya as lethal. With 6 cards in hand, I don't particularly want to make them discard 4 cards, as they will still keep the Teleria West and have Titan up. They transmute the Teleria West, cast Summoner's Pact, but luckily that's counterable, so we use our counterspell. They then give their Secura Tri-Builder +2/+0 and get in for 3. They then Vesuva, copy my Castle Vantress, and say go. With Snapcaster Mage, we can draw 2 cards with Archmage's Charm, untap, activate all our Planeswalkers, attack with Solitude, play our Hall of the Storm Giants, and say go. Our opponent casts a huge Hydra Krasis and a Summoner's Pact in response to the Hydra Krasis, so we have to counter the Summoner's Pact, let the Hydra Krasis resolve, and sadly the Teferi dies to the combat step from a big hasty Krasis. We then Snapcaster Mage, Consider on the end step, and pick up a nice Aether Gust. With our Teferi Time Raveler, we bounce our own Solitude, but surprisingly the Hydra Krasis goes towards the Teferi, which means that I don't have to Solitude, as I'm just looking to win through this Kaya. When they show the coast is clear on the end step, I can now Solitude the Krasis. With a Teferi Time Raveler off the top, I decide to bounce the Urza's Saga. We can now exile the construct with the Kaya, as well as attack in with Solitude and Snapcaster Mage, leaving 2 snaps back to block. Another uncounterable Titan. Oh wait, why am I complaining? I've got Aether Gust. Gust the Titan, what can they do? They decide to go with Dryad of the Elysian Grove, but luckily Esper Charm has a hidden mode that allows us to destroy it. The end of this game though, I'm really not sure if I play it at all close to optimal. We draw a load of cards, we whiff, we draw Spreading Seas, we whiff, they untap, they play a Titan, and we use Memory Deluge and we manage to get them? With them at 17, we can animate all of our creature lands and attack for Xaxes. What a game. No changes to the sideboard, and we keep a risky hand on the draw game 3. All we need is lands, and we have a Consider to help us draw for them. With my opponent looking to be on a slow hand, I'm worried that they have Cavern of Souls, so I decide to use my counterspell here to be mana efficient and save my Prismatic Ending for something like a Dryad or another Amulet. Luckily, we're rewarded for this play. We draw a Triumph, we Prismatic Ending their Amulet, and we can hold up Consider and Solitude. With our opponent now clearly on a very slow draw, all we gotta do is keep hitting our land drops, play patient, and cast our Planeswalkers on turn 6 or 7. It has the Summoner's Pact, but luckily we have the Snapcaster Mage to counterspell the Titan, but then our opponent decides to reveal another uncounterable Titan. This isn't the end of the world, we have the Solitude, and we can block the Steve. With an Archmage's Charm off the top of the deck, I decide to go for Teferi Hero. Don't forget they have to pay 4 mana on their upkeep, and they don't have an amulet, so mana is tough. And if we do draw a land, then we have Archmage's Charm up. Anyways, I'm hoping that my opponent has a slow turn here, as let's be real, they've had an explosive start to this game, but another uncounterable Titan. With a Solitude and a Teferi Hero with no amulet, this is annoying but not the end of the world. Double Aethergust, Teferi Time Raveler, and a Dress Down. This is now locking up the game. I'd be very surprised if they are able to actually win, but look at the clock. Anyways, as this clock is ticking, I think this is a suitable time to tell you guys that MetaTraders does sponsor me, and use the promo code on screen now for 10% off your first few months. Anyways, as I was chatting, what do you think my opponent was doing? They are tapping mana, and hopefully they're just going to cast a Hydroid Krasis, but another uncounterable Titan. Oh shit, I keep forgetting we have Aethergust in hand. I go for Dress Down, but they do have the Beseju, so not only do we draw a card, but we also ramp ourselves, and then we have double Aethergust up. They top the Titan. Keep doing control things, plus all our Planeswalkers keep hitting our land drop and attacking with Solitude. We do know what they drew for turn, so let's see what they cast. Another uncounterable Titan. I really want to know how many uncountable Titans have been cast this match, because I think they've cast more uncountable Titans than I've cast counterspells. Anyways, let's gust it. Our opponent then casts a Summoner's Pact and casts a Hydroid Krasis. Again, we just have it all, so let's just cast our spells. With the clock ticking down, and this clearly being my win, I need to play very fast so that I can win with Teferi Ultimate, so I just start clicking buttons. The clock is going so low. With the Dryad off the top, we cast Dress Down. However, that does not stop the lands, because I believe that Dryad operates on layer 6, but Dress Down's on layer 4. I don't know, one of you nerds must know what it does. They transmute for a Summoner's Pact, they cast another Dryad, and my dumb ass forgets that Dress Down is on the table, so I cast Snapcaster Mage, again because of the time pressure. But I think my opponent also forgets that Dress Down is on the table or something, because they concede. I don't know, that was an insane game. The clock went low. Hard to mull a Teferi, Snap, and to Consider, especially on the play, so let's keep this. With our opponent playing a Misty, I've been a Supreme Verdict as I'm expecting it to be a grindy matchup, and we draw a counterspell. We also draw a nice Esper Charm off the top. Ah shit, it's Living End. This is not looking good for us. Counterspell is great, but normally they have Force of Negation to back up their spells. We draw a land, we play it and say go. Esper Charm is looking terrible here, because if I make them discard cards, they'll discard creatures and bring them back. They have a Grief, and I decide not to counterspell because I want to hold up Snap Consider, and I presume that they will take the counterspell. Our opponent cycles Straight Wraith, and we can see where our fate is going. They have a Charlotte's Agent, and we don't have a counterspell. For the rest of the game, we get screwed. They screw us over with Architect of Will. We have to draw 2 cards in response to the Grief. We top deck a Solitude, but we don't have a lot of good options. We can Snap Consider here to block. We find a Prismatic Ending, but I don't think that's enough. We Solitude, draw a Colonnade, and we just can't really do much here. Our opponent has the Brazen Borrower to bounce the Snapcaster Mage and kill us. On to game 2. Siding in this matchup, board out the clunky removal spells, board in the Graveyard Hate, board in the counterspells, and board in the Chalice. I keep a somewhat slow hand, but with a lot of interaction and Consider to draw us into Kaya's Gals, I think it's a decent keep. However, with the Grief from our opponent on turn 1, it puts us in a very awkward spot from the get-go. We draw a nice Teferi Time Raveler and pass. Our opponent does nothing, so we fetch a land, and we Consider into a nice counterspell. Now we can hold up counterspell with Mystical Dispute backup to play around Force of Negation. Our opponent starts to put us in an awkward spot. As they proceed to hit their land drops and cycle creatures, we can't cast spells because we need to play around Violent Outburst, but if we don't cast spells, we're going to lose the game because we're not casting spells to put threats on the table. So this is a really great play by the opponent. I think what I would have preferred to do in hindsight is to cast a Teferi Time Raveler here with Mystical Dispute backup and not play scared. We proceed to play Draw Go, and this heavily favors them as they have the 3-mana instant that wins the game. Once we get 6 lands, I decide to go for Teferi Time Raveler with Counterspell Dispute backup, but it doesn't do too much for us. Very smart play by the opponent to force pitch a card here so I can't dispute back. Now they fetch a tap land, they untap, and they've got it. Yes, I just countered a Shardless Agent in response to Living End. Gosh, I'm so bad. Well, let's hope that doesn't come back to bite us. We have the Hall of the Storm Giants, which is a great threat to attack with, so I consider with Snapcaster Mage so I have something to block. With an Esper Charm off the top, I decide to go with Hall of the Storm Giants attack, as they are on 13 life, and it kind of makes it hard for them to attack back. They have agreed to discard my Esper Charm, but luckily with the Celestial Colonnade we can attack for 4 in the air to threaten lethal next turn. Our opponent attacks with both creatures, but they have the Violent Outburst to pump for 2. That Snapcaster Mage having to block sadly lost us the match. I was tired from the previous Titan matchup, so we lose. On to the next one. On the play here we have a nice Consider, Deluge, Counterspell, Prismatic Ending, Esper Charm hand, which I definitely don't want to mulligan. We draw a Supreme Verdict, which I'm not too happy with, but then our opponent untaps and plays an interesting creature, which makes me happy because I have a load of removal in my hand, so we counter, untap, and draw. With a Bolt and a Draco, I just Esper Charm draw 2 here to hit my land drop, and then I can Supreme Verdict the 4/4. Our opponent does nothing, so we untap and we consider, but then surprisingly, they have a Spell Queller. So we just Prismatic Ending, get back our Consider, and we find a Wandering Emperor. We untap, draw a land and pass, and our opponent bolts our face, something we don't care about. In their draw step, I decide to cast Snapcaster Mage to represent Esper Charm, but they have the Spell Queller. So on their end step we use our other Snapcaster Mage to consider. Here we untap, attack, and we can actually use the Wandering Emperor as a combat trick, something that rarely comes up, but we can give our Snapcaster Mage first strike, kill the Queller, cast the other Snapcaster Mage, and we can consider again. With loads of removal in our hand, it's clear where this game is going, so there's not much thinking left to do. Our opponent casts a spell, we cast a removal spell, and they concede. Sideboarding for this matchup is easy, all the creature stuff in, all the slow counter spells out, not too difficult. Game 2, we mulligan a clunky 7 but get a nice 6 with a lot of removal. Our opponent leads with a Triumph, so we obviously play a land pass and will consider. We find a Teferi Time Raveler and a Solitude. They play a Sign of Draco, but I'm not too afraid of it. Our opponent untaps, plays a Rest in Peace, a card that I don't think is great in this matchup, and attack for 4. I think this is a clear untap into Teferi Time Raveler. Our opponent has a Lightning Helix and the Sign of Draco again, and we draw a Kaya's Guile. Things are looking great for us. I want to play around Spell Queller as they've showed us multiple copies in game 1, so I Sorcery Speed Guile as they only have a couple cards in hand. Well, those couple cards turn into a Bloodbraid Elf, into a Shardless Agent, into a Lightning Helix, which actually puts a fast clock on us. I'm not too worried because we do have the Solitude. I want to play around cards like Hardcast Mystical Dispute, so I decide to cast it Sorcery Speed. However, they follow up with another Bloodbraid Elf and get another Shardless Agent. However, hitting a Cindervines, that doesn't seem too relevant here. Our opponent only attacks with the Bloodbraid Elf, I presume playing around Prismatic Ending, which I'm not too big of a fan of here, but we block and gain our life. With another Solitude, I think it's clear we play our land and pass and let them attack so we can get rid of both creatures. It's successful. Not too worried about a Sign of Draco, it's clear, play our land, play our Teferi and tuck. With no removal spell for the Teferi, it is going to be a bloodbath. We draw cards like Engineered Explosives, Dress Down, we have Prismatic Ending, we can cycle the Triome, we have the Teferi upticking, so I think you can see where this game goes. My highlight of this match though, go to your draw step, discard 2 cards, easy money, destroy the Engineered Explosives, bang 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 bang, you're dead. Being on the play round 5, we keep a nice hand with Counterspell, Snap, and Solitude. We can also cycle one of these Triumphs if we do Flood. Our opponent leads with Stomping Ground and has the Ragavan. This is scary as I think that they're going to be playing Blood Moon, and we don't have any basics. They also could be on 60 card 4 color control, but it's very unlikely. I decide here that I'm just going to try and block with my Snapcaster Mage, and at worst I have to Solitude pitch Esper Charm. Somehow the block manages to go through, and our opponent casts a Tarmogoyf. Here I decide to play my Triumph, as I can hold up Counterspell. If I don't use it, the next turn I can Prismatic Ending plus Counterspell. Our opponent has the Blood Moon, which we were expecting them to have, so now we can untap and cast spells. As we draw a Snapcaster Mage, I decide to hold up Counterspell and Esper Charm instead, as we can gain the life back from the Solitude, as well as I just want to have Counterspell, which we can use for this Magus of the Moon that they just cast. Counterspell is a really nice pickup here, as we can Prismatic Ending the Tarmogoyf, attack for 2, and still have Counterspell up on their turn. Our opponent plays an Ignoble Hierarch, so I decide not to attack, and the opponent stomps our Snapcaster Mage on the end step. This to me means that we should just Esper Charm them now, as they have 2 cards in hand, and hope that they whiff their draw step. Seasoned Pyromancer, are you kidding me? Our opponent gets in for 1, we untap and draw an Archmage's Charm. It's awkward as we can't cast his Solitude, but with counterspells and charms up, there's not too much that they can do. With 2 cards in hand, I decide to Esper Charm discard 2 again, as I just don't want them to have a Blood Moon come down, and I want to get a 2 for 1. They cast the Bone Crusher, get in for 3, and pass. With a Prismatic Ending off the top, I really want to hit my land drop here, so I'm going to Charm draw 2 in my main phase, and we hit a Consider, so let's Consider, and we still whiff on land. This game is just mind-boggling to me. We have the Solitude, so we have to get rid of the Bone Crusher Giant, and our opponent has a Treetop Village, the hardest creature to remove. This is not looking good for us. With double Counterspell and a Teferi off the top, we still haven't hit our land drop, so we have to Prismatic Ending the Seasoned Pyromancer and have the shields down. Our opponent confusingly uses Besage You on us, I don't understand why, gets in for 4, and we still whiff on land. GG, what the fuck was this game? Sideboarding, just want to bring in the 3 Gusts and board out spells that are really bad when Blood Moon is on the table. We keep a really nice hand game 2, our opponent has the turn 1 Ragavan, but we have the turn 2 Prismatic Ending. Now, do you know what the rule is when you Prismatic Ending a Ragavan? I think they might have wanted... Yep, they just have another one, and the Treetop Village means they can't dash it. I go for Teferi Time Raveler here to bounce. If they want to dash the Ragavan to kill the Teferi, then it costs them 2 mana and doesn't give them a treasure. This is what they decide to do, and they have a follow-up of Ignoble Hierarch. Being afraid of Blood Moon, I play my Teferi and plus this time because we can then hold up Bloodchief's Thirst for the dashed Ragavan, as well as we can just use it on the Hierarch if need be. Our opponent untaps, doesn't dash the Ragavan, so we Bloodchief's Thirst the Hierarch at the beginning of combat, and they follow up with the Chandra. Our opponent pluses the Chandra, dealing us 2 damage as they can't cast the spell, and we untap and miss our land drop. Having a Gust, we can consider for a land and then Gust the Chandra in the draw step to get rid of it. Our opponent attacks with Treetop Village, and we cannot Prismatic Ending it, as Prismatic Ending specifically says non-land. They bolt our Teferi, killing it, cast a Ragavan, but we can Prismatic Ending that one. With a Supreme Verdict off the top, and we're just looking for our 5th land, let's Esper Charm them in their draw step, take 3 from the Treetop Village, and see what they do. Wait, what? Surgical Extraction against me? Okay. Treetop Village gets in for 3, and we draw a card. As they didn't Surgical the Aether Gust, we have Snapcaster Mage Aether Gust up now, which is great because Treetop Village is green. With 3 good spells in my hand, the rest of this game plays out trivially. Our opponent casts a spell, we cast a removal spell, we cast a Teferi Hero of Dominaria, and start drawing cards. What confuses me though, is that they have Torpor Orb in their deck. Torpor Orb? Don't you want to be playing Seasoned Pyromancer in your deck? I don't understand, but... Yep, they have Torpor Orb and Surgical Extraction, so this is looking good for Game 3. Going into Game 3, we keep a nice hand on the draw, but we don't have a way to get a basic Plains. With the Solitude though, we can have an answer for a turn 1 Ragavan, but they had a Ragavan turn 1 Game 1 and 2. Are they going to have a Game 3? Yes. The magic gods can feel the tilt going through my blood and lets me top deck a Prismatic Ending to 1-for-1 the Ragavan. Beautiful. Now, what did I say when you Prismatic Ending a Ragavan with your first land? Yep, they have the second one. This one I think is a good idea to Solitude, as I don't want them to get the treasure, as well as I think it will run away with the game if we let them keep bashing us with Rag. With the Wandering Emperor off the top, I'm scared that they have a Blood Moon, so I'm going to consider here to find a Flooded Strand or a basic Plains, so that if they do have the Blood Moon, it's not the end of the world. We bin a Hollowed Fountain, find a Consider, play that, and pass. Our opponent misses their third land drop. This is exactly what we want to see against a Blood Moon deck. With an Aether Gust off the top, I'm starting to feel confident. I make a questionable play here as they do cast a Blood Moon and I decide to Gust. It might have been better to Snapcaster Mage Consider to find a Flooded Strand, then we can Aether Gust the Blood Moon in their draw step, use the Flooded Strand to find a basic Plains, but again, I think Gusting here is fine. If we draw a land, we're in a great spot. Our opponent recast the Blood Moon, but this time we do go for the Consider line. Now, I believe we make a mistake. We go for the Aether Gust on the Blood Moon in the draw step. We should have waited till the end step. They punish us here with another Blood Moon in hand. Now, we don't know if this is a 100% punt, as if they did want to just cast the other Blood Moon, they could have, and we would still lose. Sadly, we get locked out of the game, and we lose the match. GG's, I really enjoyed playing with 4 Esper Charm. I think it's somewhat decent, but you do struggle against a lot of top meta decks, as we didn't play against anything like 4-color control. As always, if you did enjoy this video, then please like and subscribe, as it supports me, as this took 10 hours to edit. That's about it though. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Check out this video, because YouTube thinks you'll like it.
Who knew I would make it this far? They hated, they never believe me. Yeah, I would never drop the ball. I know I make it look easy. Yeah, Mayweather with the defense. I don't care what a critic got to say. I got them picking up the pieces.